Some people just don't want to hear about themselves. I was very much giving, like, yeah, God, my friend's comfort is better. Sometimes it can take me 2 weeks to respond to a message. I'm not saying that because I'm proud, but I'm saying that because it's the truth. I've seen how in certain dynamics, just the fact of me being married, people have maybe pulled back and been like, oh, you're just with your husband. If you can't speak up to me about what I've done to you, then I'm sorry. Hello and welcome back to Discern. If you're new here, welcome. This is conversation 3, so don't worry, you haven't missed too much just yet. And before we get into today's conversation, first of all, this heat has been absolutely winning the war on me. Secondly, I'm sorry. I know I might not have any regular listeners or watchers yet, but it's important to take accountability because I haven't uploaded a conversation in like a month. Partially, I want to say because I underestimated the work time energy that goes into this, but really it's because I have actually recorded this episode twice and I've just not liked it. I understand consistency over perfection and all the things. However, I do think I want to make sure each conversation is impactful and meaningful and not just putting it out there just to put it out there. And when I say these conversations haven't felt meaningful or impactful, it's because I feel like I was approaching this particular conversation from the mindset of like, here's advice. This is what you should do. This is why this happens. And while I love a good research fact check, bringing in what I've learned, I do think what is a more appropriate approach for this conversation is to be real, honest, and vulnerable. Because at the end of the day, these conversations are meant to be deep, they're meant to require a certain level of unpacking without making it all about myself. I do think the examples or the insight that I'm able to share from my own experiences helps us get to that point. Before we get into what the topic of today's episode is, let's talk about today's candle. So, today's candle is another TK Maxx Home Sense purchase. It is called Jasmine Saffron. And I love this candle. Sometimes I don't even burn it. I just sit next to it because it smells so good. It's got like notes of amberwood and cedar, and it just smells like perfume that I would personally wear. So I love it because it gives mature. And on the note of maturity, today's episode is titled New Seasons, Old Friendships. So, I want to approach today's conversation maturely. Sensitive is an understatement for how I feel towards friendships and relationships in general. But I feel like I want to approach this conversation from a place of love, accountability, growth, and reflection rather than hate or pettiness, but still being real. Okay. So, as I said, the whole advice method wasn't really working out. So, I have some questions I'm going to ask myself. I haven't pre prepared answers in any way. So, I'm going to kind of go off the dome a little bit and just speak about my experiences with friendships. I am a certified yapper. So, hopefully, that doesn't mean I completely go off tangent. When I approached the conversation before, like I said, it was very advice based, but I think the key principles I based the conversation around that are still helpful to share is that when seasons of our lives change, oftentimes this can impact relationship dynamics, particularly friendships. And I have definitely seen that in my own life as things have happened, not happened for me, how that has impacted friendship dynamics. And the key drivers that I kind of note for this are the changes in priorities, changes in responsibilities, differences in lifestyle, but also things like value misalignment and how it falls into those things like jealousy or envy creeping in to the friendship, things like resentment creeping into the friendship, but also things like miscommunication and unspoken expectations. So I want us to kind of remember those things as we navigate today's conversation. And hopefully, as I speak, we'll see how naturally these themes occur in either the examples I give or just how we talk about friendship in general. How has always feeling a little different changed the way I approached friendship? And it's important to note in that question that I have always felt a little different, hence the question. For as far back as I can remember, I've just always felt like I don't really fully fit in or like a bit of a lone wolf. Like I've always had friends or a friendship group, but like I never really felt like I fit in, and that could be a surprise to some people that I was or am friends with, but that's how I felt internally. And I think a lot of this goes back to the context of which my friendships first formulated. So, like I said, I've always felt like that as far back as I can remember that I don't quite fit in. But one of the earliest memories of where really how I started to navigate friendships changed was going through a traumatic incident in relation to friendship. And yes, we use trauma all the time now, but I actually mean traumatic, both mentally and physically. I spent 1 year in boarding school in Nigeria when I was in year 7. No, I was not bad, but I was there, okay? And that situation was really horrible to the point where I just kind of blocked it out of my memory and I avoid speaking about it. But I think it's important to note when I'm being honest about reflecting back on friendship and how I've then maybe navigated friendships moving forward. And I feel like it's meant that sometimes I've approached friendship from a place of like distrust or a place of like expecting betrayal, which feeling like people don't really have my best interests at heart, or feeling like people are nice today and bad tomorrow, or just feeling like you don't quite belong here. That has been something that I've consistently tried to work through. And in some instances, I'm like, I have met people, I have met women that I have completely fallen in love with from a friendship perspective. So it hasn't hindered me making friends entirely, but I'll definitely say it keeps a blocker up, and I am definitely weary of people for the most part. And I'm very cautious. I'm very much a slow burner. Like, it's a red flag to me if you're trying to be my best friend in 1 day. And I think that's good because I think we need to have discernment when it comes to selecting friendships. But it also means that sometimes in situations when people are coming together and just gelling really quickly, I'm always apprehensive. I'm always kind of taking a step back as well. So I would say that's how, always feeling different has impacted how I approach or see a friendship. Did every friendship end because someone was wrong or because it was simply meant for a season? This one is a big one because I do think in some friendships, accountability needs to be had, both on my part and their part on the friendship ending. 100%. But definitely, I would say that there are instances where simply people grow apart. Like I said, values change, and I can definitely see myself as the person who has changed quite a lot through the years, not necessarily like I've always felt like the other person changing. There has been situations where I have felt the other person changing, but I think more times than not, I'm likely to be the changer. And for me, that means that sometimes things that I was okay with or things that didn't I didn't mind so much, or things that was like, okay, well, this is them. As I've changed, as I've evolved, I've become clearer in who I am or who I'm meant to be. I would say that it's definitely impacted how I'm able to show up in certain friendships. And sometimes it's meant more of a natural drift, but sometimes it has meant some like difficult conversations that needed to be had in order to kind of, move on from that friendship. So yeah, I would definitely say friendships sometimes end because of the change in seasons. They definitely end because you're changing, and what you need from a friend is then changing. And I don't think we need to be exactly like all of our friends and have exactly the same values, like without any differentiation. However, I do think it is important to be aligned with your friends. I think there's a scripture in the Bible that talks about like the good or bad company corrupting good character. So you would be delulu to think that you could be friends with someone who is like morally corrupt and does everything opposite to how you want to live or how you're aspiring to live, and to think that that doesn't impact you in any way. I do think there's an element, or one thing that comes up often is no, but we need to be friends with people that are different to us. That's how we influence them, that's how we change them. And yes, I do think I agree with that to some degree, but I think it's important. Like, if that person is your inner circle, then I think that's very difficult. If that person is a friend that you associate with, or an associate versus a friend, I think you're still capable of influencing them and showing them how to navigate things from a place of love without it compromising you and your own beliefs. And I, especially when you're in that season of transition yourself and you're just trying to make these changes to your life or your lifestyle, etc., your faith or your willpower is not that strong yet that you won't be affected by what the people around you are doing. So I think it's important to keep that in mind for sure. One thing I would say that I've taken accountability for, I would say for me, I haven't always been vocal. So oftentimes, if a friend is doing something that I don't really like, I have held back until the point I'm irritated. And I don't want to make excuses, but I do want to unpack some of the potential reasons for this. So, one of the things is, I think, upbringing and just like basically learning to hold back your opinion on things, or hold back what you dislike, because you're thinking the other person doesn't care, the other person doesn't want to receive this, they're not going to receive this. Um, I would say that, and how it's fed into my self-esteem at points. Again, like never really feeling like I fit in. So when I do have a friend and they're doing things that are not so great or rubbing me the wrong way, feeling like, oh, I don't want to ruffle feathers too much, or I don't know how they're going to receive this. I don't want to jeopardize the friendship. I don't want the friendship to end. Um, but I would take up accountability, because it's meant that sometimes I'm staying in situations that aren't really true to me. And I think it's important to ask yourself, if you are in a similar situation where there's something that your friend is doing and you're not communicating it, it's important to ask yourself, am I compromising a part of who I am in order to please someone else? Because I do think it's a form of people pleasing when you're not speaking up for yourself. And I do think it can create like bitterness in the friendship. And like when I'm watching Housewives, I can see it play out sometimes. Like, people are speaking behind each other's backs about things, not because they're terrible people, but because their friend has done something to them they don't like, but they're not confronting the situation. They're not confronting the situation because they think that's their way of valuing or protecting the friendship. But actually going to run your mouth to everybody but that friend is probably one of the biggest disservices you can do to the friendship. So I would say speaking up is definitely something that I would take accountability for. However, in recent years, I would say I've gotten a lot better at doing that and just letting my friends know when I'm not happy about something. Like, obviously, being mindful of the tone and how and when that I have these conversations, or even just understanding sometimes not everything needs to be said. Am I capable of moving on from this because maybe it's not necessarily a pattern, or my friend is going through a difficult time at the moment and I want to give them a level of grace and understanding in the situation. So being able to discern, like, okay, this is an incident where I absolutely need to have the conversation, and this is an incident where perhaps, I don't need to have this conversation right now, or I don't need to have this conversation because I'm able to move forward without a conversation and not harbor any resentment towards them. But I would say the disclaimer I will give when you're honest and transparent with your friends, yeah, it's all good, but people aren't always going to receive it the way that you intend it, because I've had situations where I've spoken to friends about what they've done that's bothered me, and it has been like the catalyst to the friendship ending, or it has caused further friction in the friendship. Even when you approach it from love and grace, it can be misinterpreted. People can be defensive when they feel like they're being criticized. And some people just don't want to hear about themselves, if I'm keeping it a buck. And again, that's where you need to make the decision. If I cannot tell you as my friend, this is what you've done to upset me or bother me without it turning into World War II, then is this a friendship that I really need to have in my life? Is this a friendship that is just going through a difficult season and we'll get through it? Or is this part of this person's wider character? And this is just a further example of why perhaps we aren't aligned now, or we are no longer aligned to be friends. And when I think about that situation again, I think of this scripture about like a brother being born out of adversity. Like a friend is there like when things are good, but a brother is born out of adversity. Part of being friends is being able to have tough and difficult conversations regardless of how that ends. You cannot control the other person's response to what you communicate. What you can control is how and when you communicate it, but you should absolutely communicate it, unless it's small, minor, and you're able to move on and not harbor any resentment. Has God ever used your loneliness to draw you closer to Him? And for me, absolutely. I feel like even recently, like last year, the year before, there was a situation with a friend that I would often call and just like talk about life with. And if something happened in my day, I would often talk to her about it, even though I would say I'm in someone in friendships that tends to hold back. And usually I create space for that person to talk about their feelings and their emotions and their day. But I had a dynamic with this friend where sometimes I would often speak about like my day and things that bothered me or things that went wrong. And there was a period where like she wouldn't really answer my calls or take long to respond to my calls, or would have things going on in her own right. Um, and I really felt God speaking to me at that point, saying, like, friendship is good, but this person should not be your first point of call. When you are stressed, worried, anxious, whose word is better? Whose comfort is better? The comfort of this friend or my comfort? And by my actions, I was very much giving, like, yeah, God, my friend's comfort is better. And that's absolutely not true. So I've really, really, really tried to grow in that aspect over the last few years, and that when something happens, to speak to God about it first and foremost. Like, He should be my absolute bestest friend. Him, my husband, my friends, my family, and not necessarily in that order, but you get in that order from God being first and then everybody else after. Like sometimes people won't have the right word. Sometimes people will give you terrible advice. Sometimes they're not going to be available to pick up your call. And it's important to have somebody who is there for you through thick, through thin, ups and downs, someone you can be honest and real with, somebody who has an answer rooted in wisdom for everything. And there's nobody that does that but God, but Jesus. So I think through seasons of loneliness or seasons where I felt like, oh, this friend is not showing up for me in the way that I would like them to, God has definitely taught me a lesson on relying on Him first and foremost and not any friend or friendship. Absolutely. Who have I Ooh, it's given H factor. Okay, who have I become over the last 5 years? When I first think of this question, obviously I've said that I think I'm usually the changer. I'm usually the friend that's changing. However, when I think of, oh, okay, who have I become in the last 5 years? I think I can think of obvious things like milestones. Um, in the last 5 years, I have gotten married. In the last 5 years, I've gotten a home. In the last 5 years, I have completed my master's degree. In the last 5 years, I've progressed in my career. In the last 5 years, I have obtained certain material possessions like my car. But I think when I'm really thinking about the last 5 years, those things are really important, specifically the marriage point, and maybe I'll come on to that. I think for me, the biggest driver of change in the last 5 years is coming into myself, sort of, because I still feel like I'm very much on that journey, but more so my relationship with Christ deepening and really trying to be a better Christian, number one. Number two, but also like finding myself and my personality a bit more. I've always kind of felt like I was introverted with a massive personality, but I think now I'm a bit more honest about that with myself. Like, I'm not going places I don't want to go. I'm being real about not leaving my house when I don't want to. And sometimes I still have a conflict with this because I want to show up for people, absolutely. And I want people to know that I love them. But sometimes when I'm physically or mentally exhausted, it's like the last thing on my mind to show up at a certain social event. So I think that has become more evident in terms of like how often I might see people or show up to things. So I would say that's definitely one of the ways I've changed in recent years and how that definitely impacts friendships and relationships. And also in relation to my phone, I've always been somebody who's terrible with my phone, but I think it's really showed over the last 5 years that sometimes it can take me 2 weeks to respond to a message. I'm not saying that because I'm proud, but I'm saying that because it's the truth. I'm terrible with my phone. I don't really use social media. I haven't used it in a while, bar YouTube. Like, I'm not really on anything else at the moment and haven't been for like a couple of years. And it doesn't even feel like a couple of years. That's how like it's just my norm to me. And that again impacts friendships because sometimes I'm not seeing what's going on, and people do use social media to let people into their lives, and I can't always see that. So I very much have to be intentional about the people in my life and how I show up for them, being that I'm removed digitally, but also I can be removed like physically as well. But one thing about me, if you're my friend and I'm out with you, I'm giving you my 100% attention. I'm not scrolling on my phone. I'm not distracted. Like, I am there with you present. And Again, I felt a lot of shame about my personality and not wanting to be places and sometimes force myself out. But I think in the last 5 years, I've just accepted like, this is my personality. I can understand that parts of it will rub people the wrong way, but I just try and be as open and candid as I can be with my friends and my friendships. And then the other part I was going to get onto was just around marriage. Like, I feel like being married does take up a certain level of my time, but me and my husband are very intentional about not being each other's only friend. So he very much has time to be with his friends and enjoy his friends' company and vice versa. And I think that's really healthy. But also, I've seen how in certain dynamics, just the fact of me being married, people have maybe pulled back and been like, oh, you're just with your husband. I want to let you settle in. And maybe from places of like genuine intentions, but not always the best thing, I would say, for our friendship. And people often talk about how, oh, like when people are married, they change, or when they get a man, they change. But no one really talks about, or maybe I just haven't seen it, how when you get married, how people change around you and how people, make assumptions about your expectations or your capacity based on that. So I would definitely say I've seen that and how it's infiltrated certain friendships, or people viewing you from a place of, well, you have a permanent living best friend, like I don't really need to be there for you like that in the same way, as crazy as it sounds. So a follow-up question from that question is, have some of the friendships changed for that reason, or am I coming more into myself? And I would definitely say the latter. I feel more authentic, more me. And I feel like the people that I'm close with, the people that I'm friends with in this season of my life definitely feels more aligned to who I truly am versus who I was trying to show up as for everyone, maybe in the past. And the final question is, can I be at peace with being misunderstood? And this one I would say I'm still working through. A part of me desperately wants to say yes, absolutely. But I would say this is maybe again where that people pleasing nature can creep into things. When people don't understand my heart, my intentions, or what I'm going through, or why I might close off, it hurts. Like, I lost a friendship last year. Maybe it had been dying before that point, to be honest, but I wasn't really opening my eyes. But at a point last year where I was so down and depressed, and I was going through a lot of things with my mental health that I wasn't really speaking up or out about to anybody. And I received a lot of silence in that season. And maybe on the other hand, that friend also received a lot of silence in that season from me. But I would say, if that is the case, that is a situation of misunderstanding, and that is extremely painful. It's painful to be misunderstood. It's painful to feel like, when I'm going through something difficult, someone has seen it as a slight to them, or someone has seen it as me not showing up for them. That is absolutely difficult. And sometimes, like, yeah, I'll be honest, my pride comes into play, and I'm not going to explain myself. I'm not going to justify this. I'm not going to beg or fight for the friendship. But sometimes I do have to also be like, you know what? As much as I've held myself accountable to the standard of, if something bothers you, speak up and say it, I also expect that from my friendships. So if I have not done something or not shown up in a way, as much as it might pinch me a little to hear it from you, I'm definitely open to receiving that feedback, that criticism, or just your thoughts, because I don't have to take it as a personal criticism, but just something that hasn't been misaligned in the friendship. And I feel like that's where the part of me is like, yeah, I can say yes, because if you can't speak up to me about what I've done to you, then I'm sorry. And again, this is where we apply discernment. In some situations, you need to reach out to that friend, understand what's gone wrong. In some situation, you're like, okay, let's drift apart naturally. This friendship has ended. And in some seasons, you need to be like, okay, like clearly this wasn't the right relationship for me, or speaking to God and saying, like, is this a friendship that I need to pursue or I need to continue? My answer to whether I'm open or happy to be misunderstood, yes and no. It definitely still hurts, but there's situations where I'm absolutely able to make peace with the fact that I'm misunderstood if I have made peace with the fact that I've tried everything to show up and be a good friend to this person. And if they still misunderstand me at that point, clearly this friendship isn't meant to be. So as usual, we have some final closing thoughts as we end today's episode. When I first thought of this episode, I thought it was going to be all about the do's and don'ts of friendships and how friendships can change when seasons change, and it's jealousy, it's envy, it's all these things creeping into the relationship. But I felt it was more important to sit with myself and ask myself these tough questions, because as I am transitioning into new seasons of my life, it has impacted my friendship. I used to think the goal was finding the perfect friendship group. One day I was going to find people that were just like me. One day I was going to find people that truly saw me, truly understood me. But I think it goes beyond that. It's not about finding the right circle. I don't think anyone's ever going to fix that feeling or feeling out of place. As I've gotten older, I think belonging starts with myself, accepting myself, knowing myself, understanding myself, being at peace with myself, but also knowing that I have a true friend in God at all times. I am not lonely because He is right there beside me through thick, through thin, through friendship breakups, through romantic breakups, through familial breakups. He is there. He is consistent. He is with me. If you don't know who you are, you'll spend your whole life chasing friends, molding to fit this friend and molding to fit that friend and molding to fit into this friendship group. And that becomes exhausting, to be honest. You'll expect people to validate you, validate your identity, validate your worth. And again, that can only come from you and from God. Some friendships will last a lifetime, and boy, that is a beautiful thing. And I always used to feel shame for friendships ending, or being somebody who changes, or seeing who I am close to in certain seasons of my life changing. I've often felt ashamed with this, like, why can't you just be consistent? Why can't you be that person that's been friends with someone since they're 11, or in the same friendship group since they were 11, and have the same friends all across their life? Because clearly that means they're consistent. But I've changed, I've grown, I've molded, I am their H factor today. I am not the same person that I was when I was 11 or 15 or 21 or 25. I am changing, and sometimes the needs therefore change in regards to friendship. Not every friendship is meant to be forever, and that's okay. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is redefine that relationship. Sometimes it will require fighting for that relationship, and sometimes it will require letting it go entirely. There are moments where we will need to choose our conviction about our values over the comfort of, well, this has been my friend forever. There's moments where we need to pick our purpose over being popular and being friends with everybody. And there are moments where we need to say whose approval matters more, God's or my friends. You are not walking alone. Maybe if you're feeling lonely, it's a sign that you're on the wrong path. You've got the wrong relationships prioritized. So if you're in a season where friendships feel different, they feel like they're changing, they feel like there's friction, I know how painful that can be. When you feel like you've outgrown friendships, it is painful. Sometimes you are grieving people you thought you were going to be friends with for the rest of your life. Grieving people that you thought your kids would call auntie and uncle. Grieving people that have been part of huge milestones in your life. I know that can be painful, but like any grief, give yourself time and grace. I am certainly trying to do this for myself. The right people will come into your life at the right time. Sometimes that time will be a season, and sometimes they will be forever. You haven't met everybody that's going to love you and that you're going to love. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and maybe more episodes will be like just speaking off the dome. We'll see. Because also I'm type A and I'm a planner and everything needs to be set out. Okay. But yeah, I hope you stayed for the vibe, but leave learning to discern better. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you will join us for the next conversation. And one thing I have decided as I go into this week is to give myself grace for the times where I've gone wrong in friendships, but also to give others grace where I feel like maybe they've done me dirty, to let it go and realize that only God can meet all my expectations as a friend.